Hello, Garland Nixon here with Dr. Jim Kavanagh. We've got NATO attacking, apparently, NATO entities attacking people in its own bloc, and the Charlie Kirk mystery continues. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. We're hanging out with Dr. Jim Kavanagh. You only have to go to his Substack, The Polemicist. That's Jim Kavanagh's Substack to check out all of his works and the things that he's doing. Follow Jim. Well, Jim, what are you on your handle on X?
The handle is on X is at the polemicist _.
All right, at the polemicist _ you can follow all the stuff. I'm trying to get our heads just about level. Close enough. Anyway, so we got a number of things to talk about. Let's start with the Nord Streaming of Europe. You know, here's what's happened. The Europeans and their proxies, the Ukrainians, have been angry at any entity in Eastern Europe, anywhere, but particularly in Eastern Europe, that are on the Russian border that's still getting energy from Russia. They've recently passed some bill where they're not going to let oil or gas from Russia pass through Europe after 2026 and something else in 2028, which is good as far as I'm concerned, because that means that Europe will have to deal with the consequences of its own actions even more. So perhaps it'll wake people of Europe up somewhat. But at any rate, your thoughts, Romania and Hungary, energy processing facilities, one of which was actually owned by Lukoil, a Russian company, processing Russian energy, just happens to be within days after they passed this new bill that says we don't want any Russian energy. Pure coincidence, I'm guessing, Jim.
You know, hell of a coincidence. The day after Zelensky gets back and, is rebuffed 100%, it seems, about the Tomahawks at least, and comes back and says, I don't feel welcome in the United States anymore, and gets together with the Europeans and has another phone call with them. And the Europeans say, we're going to take up supporting, we're going to pay for everything in Ukraine. Let's see how far that gets. But, within hours of each other, an oil processing facility in Hungary and in Romania, one in Hungary and one in Romania, as you say, the one in Hungary processes Russian oil, and the one in Romania is owned by a Russian oil company, blow up. And, it is hard not to think that this is, and Zelensky had previously said, we're going to have to go to unconventional warfare against Russia now. It's hard to not think this is Ukrainian intelligence, SVU, is it or GBU, whatever the Ukrainian intelligence agency is. It's hard not to suspect very strongly that this is an action of Ukrainian sabotage. And again, it's an action against NATO members. This could be an Article 4 or Article 5. Ukraine is, if it's established, if they ever do an investigation of it, and Hungary might, if it's established that Hungarians did this, then this is an active sabotage against NATO member. Ukraine's not a member of NATO. So we'll see. But again, it's like Nord Stream. They're not going to want to really investigate it. They're going to swallow it. Although Hungary, as I said, might be the one to investigate this. And this is the kind of thing, what we're watching here is the disintegration, not only of NATO, but of the EU. This is the undermining of the unity of the EU. Clearly, they've put all of these disparate countries into the EU, from the Baltics to Romania. And as Rumsfeld said, it's the new Europe versus the old Europe being the established France, Germany, Italy, etc. The new Europe are the Eastern European and Baltic countries. And they are much more militantly anti-Russian. So they're pushing the EU. And, have this EU. What is the EU? Well, Russia was always saying, we don't care whether Ukraine goes into the EU because that's an economic union. And that's something that, you can join any economic union you have. The NATO is a military alliance. But it's pretty clear that the EU has become the front office of NATO in a certain sense. And they are taking up very militant political and military stance against Russia. I mean, if you have the Europeans now saying, we are going to take over the funding we're going to give we're starting to see that Trump is going to give up. He's not giving tomahawks. He may stop arming Ukraine altogether. I thought saw something today was going to stop even allowing the Europeans to buy the arms or whatever. But they think that Trump is backing away from this. And they're supposedly saying, the Germans and French, we're going to pay for everything in Ukraine. We're going to give them $5 billion a year or $2 billion a year, whatever it is. And all the weapons they need. Of course, they don't have the weapons. They don't have the money to give. They're not going to be able to do this. But clearly, the EU has taken the lead in a political and military sense against Russia. So Russia may have to change its attitude towards whether it's okay for Ukraine to join EU any more than NATO. But this is all feeding what is really the trend towards revealing the contradictions within the European Union and among the countries within the European Union, and undermining. It's going to ultimately undermine both NATO and the EU. And this is an explosion like the Nord Stream. It's an explosion not only of a facility, an oil production facility, but it's an explosion of the pretense of unity of the EU.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you referenced the Nord Stream attack, because this is all one series of acts. What they're showing is this is who we are now. You will either do what we tell you to do. It's a very totalitarian, kind of a fascist view, authoritarian view. Do what we tell you or else. You can see it and I would say this, let me put it a different way. The ruling elite in Europe have reverted to their foundational moral philosophy, which is totalitarianism, fascism. See, they've still kept the feudalist mentality, throughout Europe. There's still a bunch of kings and queens running around, and they're still running around. And though they can call it capitalism or this or that, or whatever they talk about, authoritarian democracy, they still have the mindset of the king. Off with your head, peasant. How dare you come before the king? Kneel before the king. This mindset that says we are better than you, and you do what the king says, or the king, cut your head off, makes decisions, no democratic thought. So now what they're dealing with is this. People who had this illusion that thought it was some kind of democracy, that they had democracies, that they could vote, change things, that the EU was possibly, or NATO was some kind of an organization where they had rules and they went by the rules. Sure, they went by the rules as long as you did what you told them to do. As soon as you won't do what they tell you to do, they reveal the fact there were never any rules. There were never any agreements. In fact, now they're saying, I don't know if you heard this. Lately, what we heard was this: the Ukraine can't come into to the EU, because it has to be unanimous. And Hungary, Slovakia, a couple of countries says we'll never vote for that. Now they're saying, well, I guess we're going to have to bypass that rule. In other words, the rule never really existed. It existed as long as you went along with it. And when you say no, then we say, well, never mind. Oh, come to think of it, we don't need unanimous consent. We'll just do whatever we want. And at some point that reverts to everybody doesn't want it. Let's check and see what the boss wants. What do you want, boss? I want it. There you go. Everybody's overruled. That's what it eventually, we've gotten to. So my thing is, the European ruling elite has reverted to their fascist authoritarian roots. And that's where they are now. And if you don't do what the king tells you to do, if you don't do what the nobility tells you to do, you must be punished. And not just punished. It was very close. It was 2 hours apart to make the point that they were connected.
Yeah, it wasn't an accident.
Right.
To make the point, it's hard we want you not to believe this was a coincidence. As you say, look, the rules-based order, as I've always said, is we make the rules, you follow our orders. And what you're seeing is the devolution of the Euro-American liberalism and liberal democracy, the pretense of that, which during the Cold War, because there was a powerful Russia, the Soviet Union, was a powerful post-capitalist state, which had full employment, full health care, had developed the state in 30 years in a way that was unprecedented in history, from a poor surf-bound state to a space and nuclear power, and with a decent standard of living for everybody, not a great, spectacular one, but decent. And during the Cold War, there was a necessity to present the Euro-American liberal capitalism as having some kind of attractiveness, some poles of attraction that the so-called communist world didn't have, which were those poles of attractions. Well, we have freedom of expression, we have freedom of thought, freedom of assembly, political freedom, etc. With the disappearance of the quote-unquote communist bloc and the reemergence of capitalism in Soviet Russia and the absorption of the Eastern European countries into Nato, there's no longer any need to pretend that you're really interested in democracy or human rights, or freedoms. We call the freedoms of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of protest. So clearly they're doing away. I just saw this horrible video of this Palestinian woman doctor being arrested in England for expressing opposition to genocide. This is terrible. And you no longer need to even pay attention to elections. The French people vote out the government, and Macron says, "No, I'm going to still keep the government under my control." And you prevent people from voting in Romania. You only give the diaspora ballots to Romanians in countries you want to vote, not in Russia, etc., and Bulgaria, and you have complete contempt. It is a kind of aristocratic contempt for what they consider people who we're not going to pay attention to you. You are the peasants. We're the ones who have the right to rule over you, not by virtue of any democratic mandate, but by virtue of we're the good people, and we're the important people, and we're the superior people, and your job is to allow us to rule over you. And so and you don't have any more freedom of speech. You don't have more freedom of assembly. We're going to go out in the street and round up old men and old women in the street who are protesting with signs and doing nothing violent at all. And we're going to, ignore your elections, and we're going to blow things up that we don't like. So this is undermining the pretense of democracy and human rights. The United States certainly has that no longer. The European countries don't have that any longer. Look, as the United States did, the Europeans have gone along and supported the genocide and the slaughter in Gaza. I saw something today that was the Nazis killed like 100 and some children per day or per week in Auschwitz, and the Israelis were killing 50% more than that. The Israelis are worse than the Nazis, but it's not just the Israelis, certainly the Americans who were doing it. So we are worse than the Nazis, and the Europeans too, who jumped on this, any fault they find with Putin, to kick him out of FIFA, to kick him out of, to prevent anybody from having any economic relations with them, but let Israel do what they want and keep providing arms to Israel. So this has nothing to do. The Euro-American quote-unquote liberal democratic order has nothing to do with democracy, has nothing to do with the supposed virtues of liberal human rights and civil rights and human rights and freedom. And it's just trying to maintain the rule of this caste of elites, which, it's kind of bizarre. What is their claim to this? It's just they believe that they're the ones who have the right to rule by some virtue of something. It's reminiscent of blood royalty, but it's less than that. I mean, it's just kind of we went to the best schools, and we're the coolest people, so therefore we have the right to rule over you. So it's really nasty, and people hate it. And clearly the populations of these countries of Italy and Germany and France, they despise these rulers. They have no credibility at all. So it's the whole social political order based on this kind of moral supremacy or ethical supremacy or political ethic supremacy of Western European liberalism is just been degraded completely, and there's nothing left of it. And I don't know where it's going, but it's going to go to more disorder and to more arrogance on the part of these elites.
Yeah, and for people who are wondering why I'm doing so much squirming around in the seat, my sciatica is acting a little bit a bad way, so my back is not doing well. I mean, really doing bad right now. But we'll continue. So if you see me doing a lot of squirming around here, it's it's the squirming of a man in pain. Anyway, let me continue. One of the things that's interesting about this is from the very beginning, actually nothing's changed. Let me tell you why. December of 2021, the Russians wrote a document and they sent it to NATO and they sent it to the US and they said, look, we got to talk. And they made a list of things. You guys are building up on our borders. You're moving into Ukraine. You're doing this, that, and the other. Look, things are getting dangerous. Basically, we got to talk about these things. We need to negotiate. And basically what they said was we need to negotiate a security arrangement for the borders between Russia and, our western border, your eastern border, so we don't have anything, any violence take place. And I remember who was the guy who was in charge, whatever the guy's name was in charge of NATO. His answer was this: the Russians don't get a say.
Yeah,
that's what he said. They don't get a say. Russians don't get it. Yeah, that's it. The Russians don't get a say. And then it got to Blinken, and he said we need to talk to the U.S. And Blinken's position was that's not even a starting point.
Yeah.
So the position of the NATO allies was, we're not amused, peasant. Who do you think you are, Russia? You're below us. You don't have a say. You don't get to say anything. You will do what you were told, and you will keep your mouth shut and like it. That was their position. Oh, Russia. It's almost like, a plantation where a slave walked up to the plantation owner and said, we'd like, we're working too many hours a day. We'd like to not back, instead of 12 hours a day, we'd like to go back to 8. A slave walked up to me and asked for, take this man out and hang him, right? How dare you? You don't understand. It was like the Russians didn't understand the hierarchy. In their mind, Russia was not a nation or a world power or anything. This is a hierarchy. And the Russians, these lowly Slavs, in my opinion, they don't get a say with us. Furthermore, don't they understand why we're doing that? Because we're going to overthrow their government and steal all their stuff. How are we not going to do that unless we build up on their border? So shut up, and then we'll get everything built up, and we'll overthrow your government and steal all your stuff. Nothing you can do about it. Okay. In reality, when you get that kind of a confrontation, there will be a kinetic result. You know what I mean? So the Russians said, okay, it's up to you. Wham, there we have the clash. Here's what's interesting. And we could get to Trump and Putin's no longer having a meeting. And what I read was, because this is all of mine, I read that apparently Lavrov talked with Rubio, and Lavrov said, no, we're not halting along the lines. And Rubio said, okay, well, I guess there's no point in meeting, right? In other words, the Russians have never, under any circumstances, changed what they were going to say. But neither is NATO.
That's right.
NATO's all along said, we're in charge and you ain't. And Russia says, okay, we'll have to figure that out. Like the old days, the movie where guys would say, we'll step outside and settle this like men. And they put up their dukes and one guy comes back in, right? That's the bottom line. And, but the thing about it is we're all looking at it saying, we know who's going to win this one. And anyway, your thoughts on all of that and how even their battle with NATO, with Russia, turned inside. So if you're a European and you say, well, perhaps we should work with, you're a Russian, whatever, stooge. You say, I got some questions about what we're doing. Only a Russian stooge would ask these questions. And now it's become a complete witch hunt. Anyway, Jim.
Well, first of all, let me ask you, because I heard something about that today very briefly, but is it the case that the meeting, the summit meeting has been called off?
That's what I hear, yes.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that. I was very surprised that there would be a summit meeting for all the reasons you're pointing out. Look, these are two irreconcilable positions. The Russians are proposing an ultimatum, really. They're demanding the capitulation of Kiev to their demands for the accession of Donbass and Crimea and Kherson and Zaporozhia. And the Ukrainians are demanding the Russians have to get out of all of this. That's their position. And for each of those stakeholders and principles, those are existential positions. Okay. And the Russians didn't go into this to make a point, some other point, they went into it because it's an existential importance to them that Ukraine never be in NATO, that Ukraine remain a friendly state to them, a neutral state, a demilitarized state. And that's going to mean a change of regime in Kiev, because Kiev is the fascist regime in Kiev doesn't want to do that in any way, shape, or form. And Kiev, the fascists in Kiev who are behind this, and the Americans and Europeans behind them, for them, this was a regime change war against Russia. They didn't want to get out of this. Not only were they not going to give anything up of Ukraine, but they wanted regime change in Russia. This was a regime change war against Russia. And the fascists in Kiev always knew we're not going to win this war. The only way forward in this war is to get a war between the United States, NATO, which means the United States, and Russia, in which the United States overthrows the Putin regime in Russia. That was always their strategy, the end game for them. They knew they weren't going to win. They knew they had to. So where is this going now? You have a situation in which the Europeans and the neocons and the Americans are trying to keep this war going. They know it's clear that the Russians cannot lose and the Ukrainians cannot win without direct US NATO involvement. But nobody really wants to do that. So they just want to try and keep the war going as long as they can to put this. And this whole premise of let's have a ceasefire along the line of conflict would again allow Ukraine to regroup and take some time and take a breather, etc. And the Russians don't want to do that, and for good reason. They should just win the war. That's if I'm in the Russian general staff, that's what I'm going to say. We're winning the war. Let's keep winning the war. But Trump doesn't know. He's been kind of, I don't know what I want to do. But one day he wants to do this, one day he wants to do that. But it's going to be very difficult because the pressure from Zelensky and Ukraine, and from the Europeans, and from the American neocons, the Lindsey Grahams, etc., is going to be, because you didn't walk away from this right away. You said, you've proposed this. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's trade Donbass for Kherson and Zaporozhia. And if you don't get the Russians to do that, and you just walk away from it now, you're gonna lose Ukraine. You'll be blamed for losing Ukraine. Donald Trump, there's the old thing in the 60s, who lost China, as if it was ours to lose. But that's what they think about Ukraine. That this is ours to lose. And we can't let it be lost. We got it. We took it in 2014, and we can't lose it now. So this is going to be the problem. Donald Trump has to decide whether he's going to walk away and just ignore, because he has to start doing that. He has to just say, I don't care how much pressure you put on me, you being the Ukrainians, the Europeans, and the American neocons, I'm out of this, and really be out of it 100%. Stop all the weapons, stop all the intelligence, stop everything. Make it, you can't play this game where you're in it. You're the principal actor and still pretending that you're somehow a neutral mediator. You're either in it or you're not in it. So he's going to have to decide whether he's going to walk away and watch Russia defeat Ukraine and defeat NATO and accept it, or he's going to do something else. I really don't know what the answer to that question is, because they're going to be on his back and say, if you let Russia win, it's your defeat. You're a big loser then. You can't let, and I always thought that the only reason he's going to a meeting with Putin is because he thinks, again, he can kind of cajole or bluff or intimidate or even just charm whatever with his Putin into accepting this ceasefire plan that was his and Kellogg's plan. And if the Russians have told him unequivocally, you're not getting that, stop thinking about it, then why would he go into this? Why would anybody go into this? I think it's still a very, very dangerous situation. And the Europeans, I just don't know but you have this situation where, the Americans and Europeans ruled the world, and they did rule the world. There were two camps during the Cold War, but since 1991, it was the hyperpower, and I say they're partying like it's 1999, and nobody was as powerful. They could manipulate the elections in Russia and decide who got elected. And they had drunken Yeltsin under their belt, blah 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 blah, and that has now changed in the past 30 years ago. They rule the world, and they still think they do. And I don't believe that enough of them have accepted enough the fact that not only do you not rule the world, but kind of there are other people who do. I mean, there are other people who have at least as much power as you economically, politically, and militarily in the world. You do not have escalation dominance over Russia or China, either politically or militarily or economically. And you did, and you assumed that you did, and you assumed that you always would. But it's gone. And I'm terrified that these people just don't believe it. I don't think that Donald Trump believes that he doesn't have this escalation dominance over Russia and China. Now, maybe he does, but does he believe it one day and not believe it the next? I think that's Donald Trump's problem. And I think there are a lot of people who suspect that's true, who kind of know it intellectually that that's true now, but just don't want to accept it existentially, and may be willing to do what we consider crazy things, blow things up, because they think that they can still get away with that and change things that way. So I don't know what's happening, because the economic fight isn't working. They clearly don't have escalation dominance economically. China does. And Russia they didn't put Russia down economically. They didn't reduce the ruble to rubble, etc. And they don't have escalation dominance militarily. They're not going to win a ground war in Ukraine against Russia, whether they're American troops or British troops or French troops or whatever. They're not going to win it. And they're not going to win a ground war in the Pacific against, or a naval war against China, or an air war, or any other war. And they're not going to win the economic war. So what
or
are they
a missile war with Iran?
Accept that and deal with that reasonably and rationally. And that's what the Russians tried to do, as you say, in 2021. They said, look, we have to get an order, a security order in Europe between Russia, Europe, Ukraine, etc., that treats us as the respected powers we are and need to be. And the Americans in Europe said, what are you talking about? As you say, you're not a respected power. You're a pawn in our game. And you better get smacked back and get in your lane. And that's not happening anymore. But the big problem is the extent to which people accept that and are willing to accept it as a matter of constant policy that we now move forward on the basis of. And I don't see that. I just don't see it.
Yeah, well, I think what we're saying is what we're getting at something here, and that is the ground beneath their feet has changed. The ruling elite in the West, the ground beneath their feet has changed, and they want to pretend as though it's the same. You mentioned Russia and China. They can't really, let's be honest, they can't defeat Iran. Iran in 12 days obliterated, Israel. The U.S. bases in minutes would be turned to rubble if there were a real war. So the truth is, when it comes to Iran in a conventional war with Iran, we can't beat anybody. We could beat the Houthis in a conventional. We can't fight a conventional war anymore because our technology is old and expensive, and it costs too much, and it's all a fraud. These are products made to make money. That's all they're made for. Yeah. I think part of this whole, I've been reading and listening to a lot on this whole Tomahawk thing, and the U.S. made like 60 or 70 some years. The U.S. would make 60 to 70 Tomahawk. To be a so-called world super military power, 60 or 70 Tomahawks a year ain't gonna get it done. Mm-hmm. Unless you're dealing with little countries that can't do anything to defend you. But if you're going against major countries, so I'm sorry, that's just not, you're not in that class anymore. They're not in the military class to really go toe to toe with any major power. Even a mid-level major power conventionally can't do it. I'll put it like this. I think if they attack Venezuela, they're going to get their feelings hurt in a hurry. Yeah. Because Venezuela does have some technology. God knows you don't want to get on the ground in that country, or you're going to get chewed to pieces. But that don't mean they're not stupid enough to do it.
Yeah.
But right now, I tell you the most amazing thing. It's not the physical part of it. It's not the kinetic part of the war. It is to watch, you and I are regular people. We're regular, they consider us regular old citizens, right? We're not supposedly the great minds of international geopolitics. We're not the ruling elite. We're not the leaders of men. We're regular people that can read the tea leaves. And we're looking at it saying, well, it's obvious you're not going to defeat them. It's obvious you can't do this. You can't do that. We can see their limits. They're easily interpreted. But to watch these people, to watch Kaja Kallas, to listen to Mark Root, and to listen to them and just say, what the hell are these people talking about? The level of disassociation from reality. And you look at them and you're like, and you're even basically saying, we've got to get ready for a war with Russia. Well, that's a pretty tall order. What are you doing? You know what they're doing to get ready? The government in Finland is practicing hiding in bunkers. They're practicing hiding in a basement. The Swedes are building more bomb shelters.
Yeah.
So I'm practicing for a war with this guy. Am I building more planes? Nah, I can't do that. I don't have any way to build planes. How about maybe getting the troops cracked up? We don't have any troops. Tanks? Nah, I can't do that. Okay, offensive weapons? We got no offensive weapons. All right, well, how are we going to get ready for the war with Russia? We'll practice hiding in the basement. Well, actually, logically speaking, if you have no offensive weapon, hiding in the basement is probably the best thing you can get ready to do. But they're pretending, acting as though they're this great world. I think Mark Rutte recently said something to the effect of, the Russians, we are far more powerful NATO than the Russians. The Russians are nothing against us, and we could easily defeat them in a matter of seconds. I'm being a little hyperbolic, but you get my picture. The gulf, the chasm between the narrative that these people live in and their physical reality to engage Russia militarily is unbelievable. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, this is delusional. I mean, they don't have any weapons left. They gave all the weapons to Ukraine. They don't produce any tanks. I think Britain has like 40 tanks and 70,000 men. And those aren't all fighting men and fighting troops. And France and Germany have given all their self-propelled weapons to Ukraine. And so, as you say, what are they talking about? Russia is a huge country, and Russia has, over the past 3.5 years, developed its military industrial complex. It's producing thousands of drones a week.
I think 1,000 a day. Those Garans are now 1,000 a day, and they're throwing 300 or 400 of them at Ukraine every night.
This is a new type of warfare that they've never fought before. The Russians have. The Russians learned it over 3.5 years. They didn't know it either to begin with. They've mastered the art of drone warfare, and they've mastered the technology of it. And these other countries haven't done anything about it. And as you say, the Americans have, expensive boutique weapons, small quantities of them that are really hot crap, and they got all the bells and whistles. But, it's like having, 3 nice Armani suits in your closet, but you have nothing to wear when it's cold out, and you need some stuff that's warm. So this is and they don't really get this. I mean, I don't know what to say about it. They're talking as if they have dominance in all these areas still. And, I don't know where they're going to go with this. And as you say, there is this other element of it in the background, which is, in these European countries, there is a pre-Cold War fascist element that's a lot of these countries have, the Lithuania, the Baltic countries, and the German state, the Western German state was built on, recycled fascists. The Gehlen organization was the Nazi spy organization, was the basis of the BD, was the German secret intelligence forces, and these are all coming back in a certain way. And they have a gut hatred of Russia that's really overwhelming their sense of rationality in a certain way. And I just don't. That's why I just fear all this stuff. What do they think they can do? But you watch them and they talk about the world as if they control it. Look what they're doing. Look at what Denmark did with this chip company that they took from China. They just destroyed the company. They destroyed themselves. They did something that was predictably going to result in a flashback on them that was going to destroy them economically. And now they're trying to dig their way out of it. And this is what Trump's done with China too. We're going to put all these tariffs and all these sanctions. China said, okay, end of your rare earths. And you look at it and you see, just to redo and revive the production, and not just the production, but the processing of one rare earth, it would take 10 to 20 years of reindustrialization that you can't do. And China has done. And China now controls almost 100%, 90% of not only the production, but also the processing of rare earth minerals to a point. They can't make artillery shells in Europe because they don't have pure enough cotton fiber, because it needs pure cotton fiber to make good artillery shells, and they don't have it. So that simplistic a thing they don't have. So where are you going to, on what basis are you going to build in how much time an armed force that's going to be capable of taking on Russia or China? Look, in the first Gulf War, 1991, boom, they had the air power. They could put out, the Tomahawks could take out Iraqi's air defenses in 10 minutes, and then they had complete air superiority, end of game. They could put in 200,000 troops over a month beforehand. Nobody could stop them, and Iraq couldn't do anything to stop them. Second Gulf War, 2006, same kind of thing. They did have absolute escalation dominance over Iraqi. The military technology and the military power was there to overwhelm very quickly what Iraq had on hand. Now you have a different situation, as you say, even with a country like Iran. Iran has suddenly, you're not going to get air superiority that easily. If you have S-300s, S-400s, you're in trouble. You're not going to just walk in with air superiority. You can't just take out all of the air defense systems very quickly. If you can't, if they have air defenses that are capable of taking down cruise missiles like Tomahawk, which is powerful but slow and can be detected. So the military technology has changed. And when you get into the war, you can't go in on the ground because you don't have enough people. They overwhelm you. For Iran, as Russia or China, you're going to be outnumbered. You're going to have thousands of drones in your face every 10 minutes. And you're not going to be able to win a war of attrition against them. And they will set up a war of attrition that they can win against you. Iraq couldn't do that. Libya couldn't do that. Syria couldn't do it. Well, Syria held on for a long time. But still, it's a very dangerous situation. Because I'll tell you this, and I'll say this again. One of the reasons they think they can still set the terms is because they do set the terms in the Middle East. They do. Israel and the United States control the military situation in Palestinian territories, in Lebanon, in Syria, and therefore in the Mediterranean. Russia and China still have not challenged the ability of the United States and Israel to set the terms of whatever happens in the Middle East. Now, that might happen, and Iran haven't been able to. Iran on its own doesn't feel like it has the ability to do that. It's not going to get itself involved in that. You can understand all the reasons why these actors don't. But that does help give the United States and Israel still, and especially the United States in this talking in these terms, why shouldn't Trump feel like he can do anything he wants? He's done it in Israel. He's done it in Gaza, hasn't he? I mean, so, he thinks he has. And can we argue with him? I mean, Israel, so, he doesn't really won, but he's prevented anybody else from winning. And he's created a situation which still looks like it's going to go his way, and it's going to be the Trump Riviera and blah, 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 Mara Gaza. And so, he can still think that. So we have a very dangerous situation in the world where the United States Euro-American hegemony is gone for the most part, but they still see that, well, here we can control things. So why can't we still control things there? That enables them to live in the delusion that they still might be able to control.
You're right. They're living in the ghost of U.S. hegemony, and they think that ghost is still alive. You know, it was like a movie I saw one time about a zombie movie, and this person was like caught in a zombie apocalypse, and they're trying to go to their friend's house, and they're trying to go this, and they couldn't, and they finally get to their friend's house, and when they open the door, their friends all run from them, and what they didn't realize in the movie was they were actually a zombie. And they didn't realize it. And that's why they're wandering through the streets. And they thought, why aren't the zombies trying to get me? Because they were a zombie. They didn't know it all along. And then they're like, oh, no. They looked in the mirror. They were like green. And they're like, oh, no, I'm a zombie. No wonder my friends say, hey, come back, guys. Right. OK, so the bottom line is this. The hegemon doesn't know that its hegemony is dead.
That's right.
And it's wandering around saying, why won't everybody do what I tell them to do? I'm the hegemon. And they're like, get away from us. You're a zombie. You know what I mean? You know, you're all blue and you look like you want to bite me. But at any rate, let's go on to something that's clear. That we know what's happening here. Charlie Kirk. We now find out, Jim. Okay, fair enough. We got trans shooters. We got people who are somehow fitting a gigantic World War II rifle with a scope that's been taken apart in their pants and running all over creation. They're shooting an amazing shot from 200 yards in one shot with an amazing bullet. What's more amazing than the shot is the bullet. That a 30-06 goes in some guy's neck. The more that comes out. And now here's the really perplexing part, if one thinks it's actually perplexing. So what I just found out, I didn't know this, for those of you out there didn't know this, what people can do is they can go on Google and check the metadata to see who was searching what. And what they found out is that before the Charlie Kirk shooting, there was someone in Washington, D.C. and in Israel. And they're searching for the Lossie Center, where the guy shot him from, allegedly. They're searching Tyler Kirk. And like a month or more before, the hospital complex where Charlie Kirk's body was taken to, there are people searching the names of all the surgeons. They're searching my God. You know, the weirdest thing in the world. And then apparently after the search, somebody went online and they found all of these really strange searches prior to the actual shooting. Google scrubbed them. Yeah. And when they went back to look for these searches, they're gone. Jim.
Yeah.
Well, I know I missed some of the things. Fill us in on some of the things I might have missed also.
Yeah. Brandon Coleman or something. I forget his name, but the guy, hat tip to the guy who did this, and he, he showed you the screenshots. As you say, Google has gone in and seemed to have scrubbed some of them, but it's Google Trends, and it's a nice little thing because, like, if you want to know, how many people when did the word conspiracy theory first come into being?
Right.
Look it up and you find, it didn't start, and you see when it started being used and how often it was used. How often was the name Garland Nixon used and when were people interested? So that's a great thing. So he went in, he said, I'm going to try and see when did the word Tyler Robinson, and he even used the middle name. It popped up in DC like the day before, 2 days before the assassination. People in DC were searching for this kid's name. Nobody, why? But he went further than that. And it's really kind of amazing when you get into it. He said, was there an autopsy or wasn't there an autopsy? Well, let me look up the name of the coroner, Amanda something, in Orem, Utah. And he finds out that in a month before the assassination, or 2 months before the assassination, there are searches for this woman in Israel. Israel is searching for the name of the coroner in Orem County, whatever county in Utah. And then he says, but there's the judge, and there's a new judge, and coming in, and there's a new FBI special agent in charge coming in. Searchers in Israel 2 months before, when all these personnel were turned around. And then he says, Turning Point said that, what happened to Charlie? What happened to the bullet and Charlie Kirk? Charlie Kirk, oh, well, he's a man. A surgeon told us, Turning Point says, the surgeon told us that this was because he was a man of steel. So this guy says, well, I don't know. They didn't name the surgeon, but let me look for the under the names of the surgeons at this hospital. I don't know, Tippecanoe Hospital, something in Utah. And he goes to the names of like 5-6 surgeons. And a month before the assassination, someone in Israel is searching the names of these surgeons at this hospital. And this wasn't even, again, people were saying, if I've heard this correctly, they took him when he was shot. There was an ambulance there, but they didn't put him in the ambulance. They put him in the SUV, and they didn't take him to the nearest hospital, which had a trauma center. They took him to this other hospital, which didn't have a trauma center. So it's hard to understand who and why people in Israel a month before, 2 months before, would be searching the names of every surgeon at this hospital. It's kind of bizarre. It really is. And you've got, the fundamental fact in this, which you can't get beyond it. I've done a little shooting with guns. I'm, no expert, but I don't think there's any person I've seen on the internet who's a military guy or a hunter or any hunter I know who would say that Charlie. What I see happening to Charlie Kirk was from a 30-06 bullet. That, he would be devastated by that bullet. His head would have been blown off. And so you've got this fundamental fact. If that's not a 30-06 bullet, and they have the evidence of this, they've done some kind of, if Candace Owens is right, the bullet was just lodged under the skin somewhere, then they have, even if they have fragments, they have enough fragments to know whether it was a 30-06 bullet or not. And if that's not a 30-06 bullet, and from my understanding of everything, it cannot be, then this whole Tyler Robinson thing and his grandfather's gun, Mauser, and also searches for Mauser, whatever the model number, Mauser 86 or something, searches for that in Israel the month before, in DC, days before the assassination, searches for the plane that was flying around.
There was a plane apparently
in Israel a month before the assassination, in DC, days before the assassination. This is something, if you're doing an investigation of a political assassination, you take what this guy found, and say, this is evidence we have to look into. We have to find who was doing these searches and why they were doing these searches. We have to go to Google and get the IP addresses of these searches and find out where they're from. I don't know what they're doing. It seems to me what they're doing is just trying to lay back and continually confirm the idea that this kid Tyler Robinson did this all on his own with his grandfather's gun, and it doesn't make a damn bit of sense. And they can't say, it's one thing. I'm all for the cops saying nothing. We're doing an investigation. We don't want to talk about this until we have all our ducks in a row, until we've got everything. We know what we're talking about. We're not going to make any speculation or suppositions. Fine. Then you shut up and you don't say anything. But when you're putting out this damn text exchange as this is we're showing you the evidence that Tyler Robinson did this. Well, then you can't say, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to tell you what we know about the bullet. You can't do that. So you either do one or the other, and they're doing one and not the other. What they're doing is trying to frame the patsy, and what they're not doing is investigating. These are not dispositive things. They don't prove anything, but they're evidence. These are points of evidence that you have to investigate. And they're making it seems clear. I mean, the clear implication of me is they don't want to follow any evidence that will lead away from Tyler Robinson.
Well, here's the other part, Jim. How did he go to court with this? My understanding is there's a court-appointed lawyer, but there are lots of other lawyers from around the country that are saying, hey, we need to talk to Tyler Robinson. We'd like to offer our services. And Utah is saying, nope, he's got to go with the court-appointed lawyer. My question is this. Tyler Robinson gets to choose. We haven't heard from him. He can defend himself if he wants to. I'm supposed to believe we can't hear. He didn't even show up in court. Apparently, he viewed it, from a distance. He's the invisible man now, if he's still alive. So if someone else wants to, let's face it, Jim, this wouldn't be the hardest case in the world to defend. you're going to put all kinds of FBI. Okay, we've got this evidence. I'm going to bring in the guy who did the Google searches. And then I'm going to ask the FBI, did you look into this? Were you ever contacted by the FBI? Did they ever ask you? I'm going to bring in the FBI. Did you ever look into this? Because all I have to show, one thing you got to show to win, reasonable doubt. If there is reasonable doubt, the jury cannot convict. They can't convict if there's reasonable doubt. It must be beyond a reasonable doubt. All you got to do. And if you show, see, a lot of people don't realize this. If you can show that the investigating authority botched and screwed up the case, that's reasonable doubt. That in the court every time, notwithstanding what the evidence says, if you're able to really impeach the integrity and ability of the investigative authority, right? A jury will always say, yeah, these guys don't know what the hell they're doing. You're never, I've seen it. You're never going to get a conviction. Okay. How hard is it? How hard is it to show that Kash Patel's run his mouth? You can put him on the stand. You can depose him. And now you can ask, did you look into that? How come you didn't look into that? The, what do you call it? You can see all the evidence. The surgeon who allegedly said it was a miracle.
Who is he?
Yeah, I can go to the hospital. Got to tell me who he is.
Yeah,
I got to find out, and I got to say who is the surgeons that worked on him. I can go ahead and depose them. I can put them on the stand. All of these people. So these cockamamie cases, and of course, all the evidence surrounding everything surrounding that text exchange, all of that stuff. And I don't know.
I don't understand how they. I don't understand what case they have. Look, this was not a 30-06 bullet. They have to come in with whatever fragments they found, and they can't say it was an autopsy done. They can't say we didn't find any fragments of that. They've said already they found the bullet. Where is it? Where's this thing that you found? Where are the fragments that you found? Show us that. I mean, if that's not 30-06, what does Tyler Robinson have to do with this case? What does that gun have? Then that gun has nothing to do with this case. So it's beyond belief. I can't see where they're going with this. Except
even that. Okay, fair enough. Let's say that you tie those guns together, right? But you still got to prove that he had the gun. You got to tie now him to the gun. Okay, that's his uncle's gun. Somebody could have stolen the gun and used it to shoot him if that were the case, right? But the story with him, how do you put him with the gun? Because the story that he had the gun and he took it apart and he put it back together and he had different clothes when he was with the gun this time, that story is not plausible. So even if you prove it's that gun, which is going to be hard, how do you then prove that it was him and he took the gun apart? But when they found the gun, the bolt action was closed and the round was still in it. But you can't take it apart. You got to open it. Yes. The shell casing was still in it, but you can't take it apart that way. No. So what we're now to believe that he opened it up, took the shell casing out. Well, it flies out when you open it up. It pops out, right? Yeah. Then he closed it. Then he put the round in his pocket.
Come on.
This is the only thing that makes sense and then after he took it apart, then he put it back in for some reason and then put the gun back to part. No.
Yeah. So they either are developing some kind of massive trove of evidence that we're not seeing that's pointing to Tyler Robinson and that gun, or they're just faking it. And as you say, they got to be interviewing. They must have investigated every one of those people on his security detail. Did you talk to that guy who took that camera down? Did you talk to this guy? Did you, everybody in the hospital? They've got to be investigating all of this. And if they think they can just put out this story in this day and age, lone gunman, Tyler Robinson, he's going to jail. You never hear from him again. What? It's just not going to work. And they're killed. Fortunately, and I'm happy that really this has also fed into the complete disillusion with Israel and Zionism, because people on the right are like, I think Israel did this, I mean? And Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. Candace Owens is a bulldog. I mean, she just won't let it go. And, she's showing, and all of these searches that were done in Israel for the surgeons and the hospital and the coroner, they were all done right after apparently this turning point meeting where Kirk invited Tucker Carlson, and everybody started, his Zionist backers started to realize he was backing away from them. So it's all, there's a suspicious evidence that has to be looked into about this. It's a political assassination. There very easily could be political motives for it, and who has the political motive for it. But at the end of the day, all they're doing is burying themselves in this again, because nobody believes them. I don't think anybody believes this story that they put out. And as I say, they didn't have to put out any story. They could have just said, okay, Tyler Robinson's a person of interest. We're going to investigate him. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we don't have anything definitive to say about this because we're not sure yet. But they put out a story, and they put out what they consider dispositive evidence about this story, namely that damn the gun and that
the text message is my favorite.
And that is not dispositive about anything. Certainly not. And I just don't. I think it smells to me he's going to have to commit suicide.
I don't see any other. I agree. I don't see any other way around.
Never gets to trial. That's why Lee Harvey Oswald wouldn't. That's why the first guy who wrote the book about Lee Harvey Oswald about the Kennedy assassination. Oh, I forget his name now. Was a lawyer who said, if I were defending Oswald, this is the kind of things I'd look into. And this is all, you can't get him into court. You can't let him in court with that. So I don't know what they're going to do. And as you said, look at the OJ thing. I watched the OJ trial at the time. It was amazing. And it was, I think OJ did it. I don't think,
of course,
I got my mind about that. But the prosecution, I mean, they fumbled everything. They were going around town with blood vials in their pockets and in the car. They were doing all kinds of crap. And of course, Furman with the N-word, clearly that, and all. And they had, I watched that trial. They had the best witnesses against OJ. The limousine driver saw him come back to the house and run into and the timing was such that, it was really a very bad witness for OJ, but the prosecution attacked him because he couldn't defend the idea that OJ went around the house and dropped the glove around in the side of the house for some reason, because that was Furman who dropped that glove. But so they were attacking the best witnesses for that they could have used, but it wasn't working for their narrative of how the thing worked out. And of course the glove did not fit, so they had to quit. So this is the kind of thing they don't. So there's not. Where's the evidence against Tyler? It's even half as good as the evidence against OJ. And if they bring it to trial, as you say, did you talk to this guy? Did you talk to that guy?
Well, the thing about it is with OJ, as I saw it at the time, they had a simple case and they complicated. They had 3 or 4 things that were, unquestionable. Yep. They had 3 or 4 things they had them on. They had a couple things. Oh, I've never had this kind of shoes. And then they find like pictures of him with that kind of Bruno Malle's on. I've never owned a pair of Bruno Malle's. Here's 10 pictures of you with Bruno Malle's. The killer had a pair of $500 shoes, the exact same. And oh, by the way, you had a cut on your left hand, and there was blood dripping on the left side, which matched yours, right? But as you said, it's not whether the person's guilty or innocent. It's the ability of the prosecutors to put together a case. And in my opinion, based on my background, I wanted it as simple as possible because the people in the jury are not scientists. And they're not law enforcement officers. Give them something simple. This is what we got. This is the size. We caught the guy laying here. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, we rest our case. When you go into all of this, around the bin stuff, you open the door, because every time you as a prosecutor say something, you open the door for cross-examination and for them to attack. And that's where they screwed up. Same thing. I watched it as an investigator. I was like, yeah, pretty much clear. He did this, but you idiots let him off. But here's my point. At this point, I don't think the greatest prosecutor in the history of the world. I'll put it like this. This is what my opinion, based on prosecutors that I've dealt with. You go to prosecute a bad case, they'll tell you, you got to bring me more than this. Yeah, but I know he did it. I know he did it too, based on everything in the world. But I can't go to court with this because if we charge him and he walks, because due to double jeopardy, we can never charge him again. So any prosecutor will say, we'll be better to let him walk until such time. It's a cold case. Maybe we come back in 6 months, a year, but I don't want to go to court with this case and this guy walks.
Yeah.
And then we get the evidence later that he did it and we can't get him, right? I can't imagine a prosecutor looking at this and say, I think we even have a prayer of winning this. It would be they should be disbarred. If any prosecutor that takes this case to court should be disbarred, and they will be humiliated and their career will be destroyed.
Yeah, look, they must have, if they don't have a trove of evidence that we have no idea about, that really hasn't appeared at all, and it's just dispositive and damning in itself, I don't know what they're going to do. Because if they're clinging, again, first principle, simple, if it's not a 30-06, it's not Tyler. They haven't given us any reason to think it would be Tyler Robinson. They've kind of got themselves locked into that gun. So where is it? Show me. They haven't shown any evidence that it was a 30-06 that hit his body. They showed you the gun. They showed you Tyler Robinson's chit chat, but give me the evidence that a 30-06 bullet from that gun was in hit Charlie Kirk's body. And they haven't shown any of that. And it seems like they can't. So I don't know where they're going to go from there. I don't know where you could go from there. And once one important element like that gets discredited, then the whole story gets discredited. Once it's like, why didn't you talk to this guy who claimed he did it? Why is he dropped? Explain to me why he was there, what he was doing, how you've accounted for him. Explain that. If you can't, then you really.
Oh, what about Mr. Shoot me, I did it.
Zinn, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So explain how you, as a prosecutor, as a police investigative team, accounted for this guy saying, I did it. Look, here I am. I dropped my pants. Look, somebody paid me to do it. Explain how you accounted for that and dismissed it. You know?
Right. And then I asked them,
how do you account for the tearing down of the crime scene?
Well, here's what I do too. I asked the investigators of the investigative team or whatever, right? Okay. This so-and-so said that, he was paid. Based on your investigation into that, were you able to find out whether or not he was paid and who paid him?
That's right.
You know what they're going to say? We didn't look into it. They got to say that because you and I both know they didn't look into it. Because if it was paid, we know who paid him.
They're going to say we looked into it. We didn't find anybody.
Maybe.
That's what they're going to say.
Well, in that case, I can't. Well, let me say you this. As the defense, don't I get a copy of the police report? Yeah, well, show me the police. Show me some of the reports. Show me the information we have where you looked into it. Who looked into it? Who did the investigation? I want to know who looked into it. Which agent was assigned to look into that? And show me the report from that, because you got to show it to me. I want the police report. Was anything written? There's a 503, I think, that they, when you start to look into an investigation, you have to document what you're investigating and things like that. I want to see the paperwork from when you looked into it, at least that you started. Who was it? And then I'm going to ask that. I can put that guy on the stand. But you and I both know they didn't look into it because we know who paid him.
I know this is what everybody thinks, and everybody is going until and unless they're more really transparent and really open and giving you more information. Then this is what everybody's going to think. It's hard, almost impossible, not to think they're covering up crap. The Israelis were involved. There were other people involved. He wasn't shot with Charlie Kirk's gun, with Tyler Robinson's gun. He wasn't shot with a 30-06 bullet. What the hell's going on? This is a cover-up. That's what people are thinking. And they have every right to think that, And again, you say nothing. You keep yourself quiet. You say, we don't know yet. We don't have anything to tell you yet. Fine. Then there's no cover-up. Then you're saying, oh, they're still investigating. But when you're coming out, it's Charlie Kirk. It's Tyler Robinson. He used his grandfather's gun. Here's his chit chat telling you that with his boyfriend, girlfriend. And there was a note that we don't have, but we reconstructed with aggressive interrogation techniques. Would you torture The boyfriend?
Well, the only thing I will say is this: that is possible. Let me tell you why. That is theoretically possible. I'm going to say this as a person who's done that kind of stuff before. It is, in theory, it's possible to explain that. Let me tell you why. If you take, I have here a simple notepad, right? A white notepad, right? If I take this notepad and on the top, I write pushing down Jim Kavanagh is a jerk. And then I pull the top paper off and throw it away. There's an impression.
Yeah.
And you can get the impressions off of it. So in theory, that's doable. In theory, it's doable. But the whole story is absurd, huh?
What Kash Patel said was, we were able to retrieve, to find out what the note said by virtue of our aggressive interrogation techniques. He said that. He said, the reason we know what the note said is because we found out via aggressive interrogation techniques. That just means,
so somebody told you who the so-called trans boyfriend thing, or
they put her under the lights and beat it.
You're right. Put a cigarette out on its skin, I guess.
I mean, I don't know what is. That's what it means. They didn't say we did it with, sophisticated forensic techniques. He said they got the information. They're able to reconstruct the note by aggressive interrogation techniques. So that means this girlfriend is going to get on the stand and say, yeah, I read that note and that's what it said. But that's not going to, that's hearsay. But you don't have the note in front of you. We're just going to take your word for that's what it said. That's what they have to be saying. I don't know what else it would mean. It's really just silly. It's unfortunately for them, you can't get away with this. It's a lone gunman. Go back home and go to sleep. With high level political assassinations anymore. You can't get away with that anymore. And, people aren't going to let it go, like the Kennedy assassination or the RFK or JFK assassination for 60 years, 50 years, and say, okay, we'll forget about it and come back to it 50 years from now and see what really happened. That's not going to happen. And the people on the right are the people who are not letting it happen. Candace Owens, I'm going to find out what's going on here. I'm not going to take Kash Patel's word for it.
And let's just say, for the sake of argument, they go in and they say, yes, Tyler Robinson wrote this note. And Mr. Robinson, did you write this note? I didn't write that note. I didn't write that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And we've got this text message. And this text message, according to came from you. And he's going to say, I did not send that text message. First of all, we know that they do have the capabilities. Remember Vault 7 to do all kinds of underhanded computer things. It wouldn't be hard for them to create that, right? Mm-hmm. I don't care who you put on from Google, also known as Unit 8200. I don't care who you bring on. If that kid says, I did not write that note, I don't know what you're talking about. That's crazy. I didn't write that. I didn't say that. I didn't do it. Jim, I believe him.
Yeah, well.
And I think a lot of people in the jury, if he's like, look, I don't know, you guys are trying to convict me. I didn't write that note. I don't know what's going on here. I didn't shoot anybody. I think I've been set up. If he says that,
yeah,
who in the hell wouldn't? Who would think? Oh no, he's lying. This wasn't a setup. It's ridiculous.
I know. You only need one person on the jury. No, it's fascinating. But again, we don't hear from him. We haven't heard him saying, and that's all right. If he wants to be quiet, that's okay too. But
it's smart. Yeah, it's smart.
If he
should be quiet.
See, I'm being set up, then he should. I would think he should say it. If he is, especially if he is a patsy. But again, who are the lawyers? Who's his lawyer? How are they? I cannot believe that they can go through this whole process and prevent him from choosing his own lawyer.
Right.
I can't believe that's possible. That's legal. That's constitutional. I mean, I can believe that they can have a certain amount of time, like before arraignment or up to where they can say, well, we're giving you this we're appointing a public defender, but there's got to be a point at which he can say, I want to interview other lawyers and choose another lawyer.
Right.
I believe that.
He's got a right to. He can represent himself if he wants to. He's got a right to pick his own lawyer to represent himself, whatever he wants to do. He's got a right to choose his representation. What is it? Esposito versus Florida, right? You have a right to representation. And right now, the only thing we are being told is he has a And I would think that ain't real smart to have the same jurisdiction that's picking the prosecution, pick the defense also.
I've never heard of such a thing. The prosecutor picks your lawyer.
I don't know, Jim. Well, at any rate, thank you very much. Certainly appreciate it. I think we pretty much covered everything. We'll get back together. We're going to have to talk about Israel and the ceasefire where firing never ceased. How do you have a ceasefire? Don't people have to actually stop? I'm turning on right there. Aid choked, ceasefire broken. Israel kills 13 in Gaza in one day. I mean, the more you see it, it's like tied and beaten. Freed Gaza detainees say abuse ended as it began. So they
ran over one of their own explosive devices and blamed it on Hamas, and then bombed the crap out of Rafah or Gaza City. They ran over an explosive device that they had planted with a contractor, not even really soldiers.
Yes.
Contractor ran over an Israeli explosive device. It blew up. So the Israelis said, "Oh, Hamas attacked us with an anti-tank missile, and we're going to therefore bomb the city, like 150 tons of bombs." It's a disgrace. This is a disgrace. This is at least as bad as Nazi fascism, and everybody who has anything to do with it should be ashamed. They found the people who they say are responsible for the killing of giving the orders to fire on Hind Rajab, the little girl who was killed with 350 bullets or something. They're naming the soldiers, the commanders. Those people should be hounded to the ends of the earth forever, never allowed to live in peace. This is horrible.
Yeah, I'm with you. It seems like they only took a break in August to go to Google so they could start searching for the soon-to-be Charlie Kirk killers.
Yeah.
And one thing you got to say about the Israelis, they actually have a time machine where they're able to go forward into the future to know what's going to happen, and then to go back so they can start doing Google searches for people who will be involved in a really strange case that nobody could have possibly known. Yeah. It is so obvious they killed them at this point, Jim. I mean, what else are you going to say at this point? Well, thanks to everybody. Don't forget Jim Kavanagh. Follow him at the Substack on his Substack, and follow him, The Polemicist, on X. And Jim, thanks, and keep up the good work. Any last words for our dear and loyal supporters in the chat?
No, follow us, like us, subscribe to us. Always great to talk to Garland.
All right, patreon.com, PayPal, buy me a coffee, Cash App. There's lots of ways you can donate, and it's highly appreciated. And of course, there's my P.O. box. You can always use the P.O. box anytime you want to. You can email me whatever you want. I had somebody email me shirts, Jim, 6 or 7 shirts, and guess what? They were really nice shirts. My favorite. I love it.
P.O. box on my profile.
Hopefully you'll get some nice shirts. I got 6 like Banana Republic. They were great shirts, huh?
130 on 6 bullets.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. Yeah, they'll probably send me a gun, and then I'll touch it, and then I'll come in, wake up at night. What happened to that gun? Now they got my fingerprints still sneaking at night still, and then rub somebody out. So that's, I guess, my fate. Let's just hope. You know what I need to do? I live in like Glen Burnie, Pasadena area. I need to continue to do these Google trends to see if like somebody from Israel is searching like shock trauma center in Baltimore, hospitals in Glen Burnie, people who'd be looking into the death of Garland Nixon and going, holy shit. So maybe we need to continue to do that. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. The most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.